can America survive a full-scale invasion? For nearly 250 years, no foreign army has ever conquered the United States. Not once. The British fought America and failed to hold it. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, but ultimately lost an empire. Since then, every major power has looked at the same map and understood the same reality. Invading the United States would not be a normal war. It would be a disaster. But what if someone actually tried? What would a real invasion of America look like? Not in movies or games, but in reality. History gives only a few examples. In 1814, British forces entered Washington and burned major government buildings, including the White House and the Capitol. In 1916, Pancho Villa and his men crossed into New Mexico, attacked Columbus, killed Americans, and then withdrew back into Mexico. During World War II, Japanese forces occupied Aru and Kiska in Alaska's Aleutian Islands, and when the United States retook them, the terrain and weather were nearly as deadly as the enemy. That is essentially the full list. No one has ever conquered the American mainland, and that is not a coincidence. The United States is one of the hardest countries on Earth to invade. The first reason is obvious: geography. America is protected by two vast oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. These are not just bodies of water. They are enormous defensive barriers. The Pacific in particular stretches across thousands of miles of open water, storms, currents, and logistical difficulty. Any army trying to cross it would have to move troops, vehicles, fuel, food, ammunition, spare parts, and air support over an immense distance before even reaching the battlefield. World War II already showed how difficult this kind of warfare really is. When the United States fought across the Pacific, it required years of operations, huge fleets, and a supply effort so large it resembled floating industrial cities. For any enemy trying to do the reverse and land on the American mainland, the task would be even harder. A modern invasion fleet would also face a second problem: detection. Satellites, radar, submarines, patrol aircraft, and surveillance systems would track major naval movements long before they ever reached the American coast. A fleet big enough to invade would be one of the easiest military targets on Earth to notice. But suppose an enemy somehow overcame that and reached the shore. The problems would only get worse. Take the Pacific Northwest. On a map, it may look like a possible landing zone. In reality, it is a hostile coastline of rock, storm, surf, forest, and dangerous inlets. Large waves, heavy rain, poor visibility, and unstable coastal conditions would make any amphibious landing extremely risky. And once ashore, invaders would still face mountains, dense forests, mud, and weather that can break morale as much as machinery. Other parts of the country are no easier. The Southwest punishes armies with heat, dust, and distance. Water becomes precious. Engines wear down. Long supply lines become fragile. Move farther inland, and the scale of the United States becomes overwhelming. The Rockies divide the western half of the country. The Great Plains offer speed, but almost no cover from aircraft or surveillance. The Mississippi and its surrounding terrain create major natural obstacles. The Appalachians break the East into ridges and valleys that are difficult to control. America is not one battlefield. It is many different battlefields connected into one enormous continent. Then there is the population. Even without counting the US military, any invader would face hundreds of millions of people already living on the land. The United States has more civilian-owned firearms than people. That does not automatically create a formal army, but it does mean occupation would be a nightmare. Because invasion is one thing, but holding territory is another. To occupy a country this large, an attacker would need to secure roads, ports, airports, railways, fuel depots, communication systems, and major cities, while also dealing with resistance in suburbs, forests, mountains, farms, and industrial zones. That is where occupation becomes brutally expensive. Local resistance would not need to win every battle. It would only need to make control impossible. Blow up a bridge, ambush a convoy, sabotage fuel, cut communications, or feed intelligence to defenders, and the invader starts losing strength over time. That is how powerful militaries get worn down. And in America, the scale of that problem would be enormous. On top of that, the United States would still be defending itself with one of the most advanced military systems ever built. It has unmatched logistics, a huge air force, a global navy, strategic bombers, submarines, intelligence networks, and bases around the world. Every state also has National Guard units with local knowledge of roads, terrain, and infrastructure. Even if one part of the country were hit hard, American defense would not simply disappear. This is why the idea of quickly conquering America makes little sense. A hostile power might damage infrastructure. It might strike ports, bases, or power systems. It might launch cyber attacks, spread panic, disrupt transport, or target communications. And in the modern era, that is actually the more realistic form of attack. Breaking a country from within is much easier than storming it from across an ocean. A real attack on America would probably begin digitally. Power grids could be targeted, communications could be disrupted, markets could be shaken, transportation systems could be confused, information warfare could turn fear into division and weaken public trust before any troops ever arrived. In that sense, the most dangerous invasion may not begin with ships and soldiers, but with cyber attacks, manipulation, and internal instability. Because a true military conquest is a different matter entirely. To conquer the United States, an enemy would have to survive the oceans, avoid early destruction, land on defended coasts, push through brutal geography, maintain impossible supply lines, defeat the US military, and somehow occupy a vast, resistant, heavily armed society. That would be one of the hardest military operations in human history. Could an enemy hurt America? Yes. Could it destroy infrastructure, burn cities, or create chaos? Absolutely. Could it temporarily seize isolated territory? Possibly. But conquer the entire country? That is a far bigger question, and the answer is most likely no. The oceans defend it, the terrain protects it, the scale exhausts invaders, the military responds with overwhelming force, and the population makes occupation extremely costly. So, could America survive a full-scale invasion? Most likely, yes. Not because war would be easy, and not because the country is invincible, but because conquering it in reality would be extraordinarily difficult. If America ever truly falls, it probably will not be because foreign troops crossed a beach. It will be because internal division, mistrust, and collapse succeed where no external invasion could. That is the real danger. Not the attack from across the sea, but the one that begins from within.